they'd look at their super and notice they hadn't actually been getting paid anything. And a lot of the time those companies would go bankrupt and they wouldn't be able to afford to pay back that super. So all this time that friends and family had been working and should have been getting paid that super, they weren't. And then it got to the end and there was no way for them to gain all that super back because the companies went broke.
You're listening to the Young Minds Podcast.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Welcome to the Young Minds Podcast, hosted by Burke, Britton Financial Partners. This podcast helps young adults build confidence and clarity when it comes to money, empowered by youth, inspired by experience. We know that navigating the world of finance in your late teens to 20s can feel overwhelming, whether it's understanding your first payslip, learning how to invest, managing student debt, or just trying to save without missing out on life, because believe it or not, it is actually possible.
That's why this podcast is here, to make finance more accessible, more understandable, and way more relevant to your life right now. Each episode will break down key financial concepts, give you practical tips you can actually use, and have real conversations about money. From budgeting and credit scores to purchasing your first home, we cover it all.
As university students coming to the end of our degrees, we created this podcast not because we have all the answers, but because we're asking the same questions you are. Each episode will be accompanied by a qualified financial advisor from the Burke Britton Financial Practice to provide insight and guidance in the topics to come. No confusing words, no lectures, just honest insight to help you make smarter money moves now and in the future.
So whether you're studying, working, or figuring things out, you're in the right place. Accompanying us today again is Delta. Welcome back, Delta.
Alrighty, so to get us started, I've just got a bit of a hook for our audience to draw us in. So I've got, imagine waking up at 60 and realizing your younger self gave you the ultimate gift, financial freedom. The gift starts with one word, superannuation. So to get us started today, Delta, we'd like to just touch on what's the legal minimum your boss has to pay into your super? Actually, let's take it back a step. What is superannuation?
Yeah, great question, Bridie. So superannuation is a compulsory retirement income scheme that we have in Australia. And what I mean by that is that when we go to work, our employer has an obligation to contribute to a super fund for us. And that super fund is designed to provide us with the income that we need when we reach retirement. So at the moment, the legal minimum that's required to be employed by your employer is 12%, and that changed to 12% back on the 1st of July 2025. Some employers are actually, trying to do their best to retain their talent. They'll actually pay more than that required 12% minimum, and that was one of the things that we chatted about on a previous podcast. Just very quickly, Super Guarantee was introduced back in 1992. So for the two of you and some of our audience members, for your whole working career, you will be part of that compulsory retirement savings systems. And just one other point I wanted to make, because it's quite topical at the moment, at present, our employer must make those contributions at the end of each quarter. So they have a quarterly obligation to make those contributions to our super fund from the 1st of July 2026. That obligation for employers will change, and they'll actually have to pay that super contribution at the time that you are paid. So if you're paid weekly, fortnightly, monthly, your super contribution will go in then. Bridie, you mentioned something to me around your experience with some friends that are tradies, so maybe you could touch on part of the reason why there is a change coming up for those payments.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a personal experience through some friends and family was that they'd look at their super and notice they hadn't actually been getting paid anything. And a lot of the time, like the trade industry is a hard industry to do well in. And a lot of the time those companies would go bankrupt and they wouldn't be able to afford to pay back that super. So all this time that, friends and family had been working and should have been getting paid that super, they weren't. And then it got to the end and there was no way for them to gain all that super back because the companies went broke. So it's a good thing to be coming back in. It makes employers stay accountable to what their legal requirements are.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really favourable system that we have here in Australia to ensure that people do have comfortable retirements. When we talk about tradies too, Bridie, probably the other point to make at this stage is that a requirement to pay superannuation is only for employees. So if you're a tradie and you're self-employed, for example, you don't have an obligation to make those contributions for yourself. However, there are tax advantages to doing so. So go and get some advice around that.
Absolutely.
Now, going into choosing the best industry fund or just best superannuation funds to pick. What makes an industry fund either the best or the right option? Is it low fees, strong returns, or member perks? How do you actually go about comparing them?
Yeah, great question, Daniel. So historically, individuals would be added to a super fund that was basically specified by their employer, but we all have choice of super now and we can choose any super fund that we might like, which is great. However, it can be overwhelming because there are, literally thousands of options around which super fund. So when we talk about an industry super fund, these super funds were designed for the members of that industry, such as construction. So the CBUS super fund, it was designed to provide benefits for their members. So that is an option. Perhaps if you're in that particular industry, then we have what we call retail superannuation funds, where we just join a super fund, again, where the trustee, so the people that manage the super fund, are doing their best to provide investment returns and benefits and so on for you as a member. And then at the other end, at the very extreme, we have self-managed super funds, for example, and that's normally something that we explore perhaps as we're a bit further into our career and we've got a greater scale of money invested.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And branching off from, well, it's built into industry funds actually. We've got different kinds of investment options, and built into that is your growth versus defensive. Can we touch on what growth is, what defensive is, what the different options are, and how do you know which one's best for you?
Yeah, great question again, Bridie. So when we talk about growth versus defensive, what we're talking about is when your employer puts a super contribution in for you, let's say it's $500, just for example's sake, that $500 is actually invested somewhere. So, anyone in Australia with money in superannuation has investments. So whether or not they're sort of actively managing those or aware of them, we are all investors in that respect. So when we talk about growth, these investments are things like shares, infrastructure, exposure to property and so on. And those are the investments that we have that we anticipate over time will grow in value. However, they are volatile, and what that means is that they can go up and down over our investment time frame. When we look at superannuation, it's a very long investment time frame. If we start out in the workforce at 18, we start receiving super, we're looking at 40 plus years before we're even in a position to start accessing some of that post 60. So the growth is the stuff that over time we anticipate will grow in value, but it will be volatile along the way. The balanced investments are things like cash, term deposits, bonds, and that's basically designed to provide a bit of a buffer where the growth investments might decrease in value temporarily. Something's happening in the market. So the key there, Bridie and Daniel, is just around ensuring that that level of risk that you take is appropriate for what you're comfortable with, given the time frame that you have that money to be invested for.
In regards to having multiple super funds, some people have multiple, they may not even realize or they may have forgotten about it. Why does having more than one super fund actually cost you? And how do you consolidate them without messing up any insurance that you have within those super funds?
Yeah. So when we look at clients that might come to us with multiple super funds, we're just assessing whether or not it's appropriate to have two super funds. So, for example, if we've got a couple of super funds, then we're paying fees on both of those funds. When I talk about fees, that term is very broad because fees might include a member fee to be part of that super fund. There might be investment management fees. Fees could be insurance premiums. So when we look at multiple super funds that a client might have, we're assessing whether one of those super funds, for example, might house some insurance. And that's a real key consideration for us if somebody comes to us and they have some health considerations that might mean they might not be able to get any new insurance from an insurer. So we're assessing all of those things. So if you have multiple super funds, what I'd suggest is, again, you have a look through the details of those. How is the money invested, and do you have insurances? If you get stuck, reach out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's very important that as you're checking off these lists, like if you need help, ask for it. It's better to ask for help than muck something up and regret it later. But tying in nicely to what we were just talking about, insurance in super. What insurance could actually be in there? And we've touched on a little bit previously in our actual insurance podcast, so go back and have a look at that one if you're listening. But how do you know if what you've got in there is actually enough?
Yeah, okay. So the types of insurance that we can hold within our super fund are death cover, total and permanent disablement cover or TPD, and income protection cover. So there's a fourth type of insurance called trauma cover, and we're not able to own that within our superannuation. So if you joined a super fund, you may have automatically received some insurance when you joined. The key there is to have a look at whether or not that level of insurance might be appropriate to you. You know, if you're in a position where you've purchased your first home and all of a sudden you've got some debt that you didn't have previously, you know, you might wish to provide for your partner or your loved ones in the event that something happens to you and you want to clear that debt. So again, my advice is always be proactive and go and have a look. Try and make an assessment around what you might need. If you get stuck, reach out.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. In regards to maybe salary sacrifice, just touching on that, maybe if we can just explain what it is, how does it work, and how it might benefit you as an employee of a firm.
Yeah, okay. So salary sacrifice is where we choose to sacrifice some of our wage or income and have that go to our superannuation fund. Why might we do that? That is because those contributions that we make voluntarily to our super fund are pre-tax contributions. So what I mean by that is if we earn $1,000 a week, for example, and we choose to salary sacrifice $100 of that, our employer sends the $100 off to our super fund, and then we only pay tax on the remaining $900. So we get sort of that tax advantage to making that contribution with pre-tax money. When those proceeds arrive in super, there is a contributions tax that's applied at a rate of 15%, but that's far less than most people's personal tax rate. And the more we earn, the more effective that strategy is around setting aside or sacrificing some of our income to go to our super. Why on earth would we do that? Because, again, superannuation is a very long-term investment vehicle designed to provide for us in retirement. So when we look at that 40-plus year time frame from when we start out, we simply have the power of compounding interest. So the more we invest early on, the greater the time period that investment has to create income and to create growth. Then we create income on that income. We create income on that growth. So that time frame is really powerful in getting us into a really good position to ultimately make decisions around, what we might do in the workforce. When we reach that latter stage, the key there is that it's very much a deferred reward system. So, where we sort of want right now, it can be difficult to really be disciplined and have that mindset around, if I look after that today, my future will be taken care of.
Perfect. And then just one more thing touching on salary sacrifice. It's a bit in the air at the moment about what the government's 50-cent contribution program is. Could we just touch on what that is, who it applies to, how you can access it?
Yeah, sure. So the government co-contribution scheme is centred around providing people on lower incomes a co-contribution if they voluntarily add to super themselves. So the government will basically give you up to $500 if you make a contribution of $1,000 or more. I haven't looked at those figures for a little while, but again, what it's designed to do is to incentivise people maybe that are earning a bit less, therefore you've got less money going into super, to add some money voluntarily, and they will give you additional money for doing so. So it's money for nothing if you can put some money into super and you sit in the right income category.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Now, this is for all the viewers out there. Maybe today, take 3 minutes, log into your MyGov, find your super funds if you don't already have access to them, confirm what your investment options are, even just have a look, check if you've got any insurance within your super funds as well. And then potentially, if it's appropriate, feel free to even try and just tiny test contribution, even $20 a week, and just see how you go. Your future self will thank you.
Thanks so much, Delta.
Thanks, Brady. Thanks, Daniel.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're keen to understand more about how financial advice could benefit you, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at Burke Britton FP, or Google Burke Britton Financial Partners to check out our client reviews, testimonials, and make a time to meet one of our certified financial planners by clicking Book Now on our website. Thanks for listening. Any information contained in this podcast is of a general nature only. No account was taken as to the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Therefore, before making any decisions, listeners should consider the appropriateness of any information with regard to their particular objective, situation, or needs, and seek advice from a licensed professional specific to their circumstances. PB Financial Solutions Proprietary Limited, trading as Burke Britton Financial Partners, are authorised representatives of Acumen Financial Planning, ABN 89051 208 327, Australian Financial Services Licence 232706.